Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you're joining us here today. I'm super excited to introduce our special guest, Christine Lang. Christine is a former attorney who works as a medical intuitive. Because she can both hear a person's spirit and see their energy, she helps people understand how their physical symptoms are usually messages from their spirit, guiding them towards improved health and better relationships. Christine, it is a pleasure to have you, to see you again. And in full disclosure, we have had a conversation before. I interviewed you about 4 years ago and we had a blast. So, hi.
Hi, it's so good to see you again. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was. So, I want to actually start with you have a book called The Body Whisperer. Your symptoms tell me your truth. What is a body whisperer, and is that synonymous with a medical intuitive?
The body whisper is in my case, it's synonymous with a medical intuitive. I tell people I'm a medical intuitive, but some of my clients call me the body whisperer, which is how we got the name for that book. It became a nickname that people gave me in the early years of my career, when medical intuitive wasn't even a phrase that was out there. So that's how it became the name for the book. So it's every medical intuitive works a little differently. And so when people nickname me the body whisperer, I'm like, okay, that kind of helps explain things. So I left that nickname as the title.
And can you explain to us, for those of the listeners who've never heard of a medical intuitive, or maybe they have a sense of what one is, but want to know your style, how do you define a medical intuitive?
I would say, in the most broad terms, a medical intuitive helps you understand what's going on with your physical body, helps you understand your physiology in a different way. Because I think we all know we store stress in our body, and that stress can lead to physical symptoms, but we don't know the specific breakdown of how that happens, what that looks like, and how to go about understanding what symptoms mean what, right, in our body in terms of stress. And so in my case, I'm clairaudient. I hear my spirit and I hear the client's spirit, and I see energy. And so I'm given visuals by the client's spirit, and a lot of times there's metaphors to help the client understand what their spirit is trying to explain to them. And my job is to help a client understand what message is being sent by a particular physical symptom. What does that physical symptom represent in terms of stuck energy, mistaken beliefs, wounding that the person is carrying? And in understanding what that's about, I can channel guidance from the person's spirit about how to release that and how to promote healing in the body in a way that's long lasting and thorough.
And so, how do you go from being a lawyer to being a medical intuitive?
Not a not a natural transition, I guess. um, well, I was raised in a Catholic household, never heard of any of these sorts of things. And when I was in my second year of law school in Southern California, developed these horrible allergies of just sneezing all the time, eyes running. It was very attractive. And back then they didn't have the meds they have now that'll reduce your allergies without making you drowsy. So my options were walk around with a box of tissues or take Benadryl and drink Diet Coke all day long to stay awake. And both those options weren't great. And after a few years of struggling with that, I just said, this is crazy. There's got to be another way. And so I started studying what was then called alternative medicine, and started working with homeopathic medicine, eventually taught study group classes for the National Center for Homeopathy because I got rid of a lot of my allergies using homeopathic remedies. And that made that connection to me of, wait a minute, this stuff's working through energy. There's answers here that my allopathic doctors aren't giving me. And so I made the link between my stress and my allergies, more stress, more allergies, and started meditating, which I was terrible at first. And you know all about this, being a meditation teacher. And started meditating and eventually developed a nice meditation practice, which reduced my allergies even further. And then I learned Reiki to do energy healing work. And before I offered a friend an energy treatment, I said, well, let me just sit and take off my lawyer suit, sit and meditate just to change channels in my brain and get out of the aggressive lawyer mode. And when I did that, I heard a phrase that I thought applied to my friend. I ushered it away like I do all the other thoughts, random thoughts that come into meditation, and it kept floating back. And when I mentioned it to my friend while I was giving her energy, her eyes flew open and she said, "How do you know that? I literally just had that fight with my husband last night. How do you even know that?" And I realized that random phrase wasn't so random. And from there on, each time before I offered a friend energy, I would sit and meditate and I would hear some phrase that would explain why my friend had that symptom and what sort of stress was behind it. And the person would get better. The energy work was much more effective. And I made that connection and just started sitting in meditation for 3 or 4 hours a day. And my spirit started teaching me, here's what you're seeing. Here's the energy pattern you're seeing. Here's how I can explain what kind of stress is stored there and how that led to that symptom. And that was about 30 years ago. And a practice was born. People started showing up and asking for those treatments. And I've never looked back.
And so first it starts off, I'm just going to work with some friends and practice these new tools I'm learning that helped me. And then when did the transition happen where you decided, okay, I'm done with law and I'm going full time as a medical intuitive? And then follow-up question with that, were there people in your life that you had to sit down and say, "I'm not gonna be a lawyer anymore. I'm
Oh,
moving
yeah.
into being a medical intuitive"? Because I bet there are people listening to this, watching, who are on that path or on maybe on the earlier side of this path, and they might have to go through some of these steps. So can you describe what that was like for you and if there's any wisdom you pulled out of that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer them kind of in reverse order because I think the wisdom that that I pulled out of it is if it's what is on your path, you almost won't be able to stop it. Right. So I kept saying, I worked so hard to get through law school. I'm still paying off my law school loans. I can't abandon that. That's the path I should stick to. I should be responsible. And yet there was no denying that each time I treated a friend, they lit up, I lit up. It felt amazing. And it was so powerful and effective. And so I turned it over to the universe and said, if this is what you want, then make it so, right? Make it such an easy choice that it's kind of a hell yes, right? And that's what happened. I treated a few friends, they all got better. They told their friends, and pretty soon people I didn't know were asking for treatments. And at one point, my husband walked up to me and said, I think you have a practice because there's people sitting in our living room like it's a waiting room, and I don't know any of them. So I think you officially have a practice. So I'm like, okay, I have a practice. And so the universe really did just sort of sneak that in there. But I think that part of why that was allowed to happen is because I didn't put pressure on myself to start earning a living right away and making this legitimate. And I have to have certain proven results. I really allowed it to flow fairly organically. One, because back then, medical intuitive wasn't even a thing. There was one person who was a medical intuitive, Carolyn Mays, that I had seen on Oprah, and that was it. But I was completely self-taught because there wasn't anyone to say, here's how to set up a practice and do that. And I like that it turned out organically, and I really enjoy coaching people in opening up their abilities. But one of the things I always say is take the pressure off yourself that you have to do it professionally and earn a certain amount of money the first year, because it really makes it harder to be open and to learn what your spirit wants you to take on as your path of being a healer.
And it sounds like you essentially trained yourself, right? It sounds like you just started doing it. What were there classes you took? Was there training you did? And would you recommend for other people who are wanting to go down this path to have training?
So I would say yes, get training, but never make the teacher's words more important than what resonates within you. So I really believe the best teacher for each person is their spirit, and the key is hearing your spirit. So spend time in meditation, spend time journaling, do whatever practices allow you to connect with your spirit and the universe and to get those messages. So that's, I think, should be the hierarchy, right? It should be your own inner guidance. It always has to resonate with you. That being said, I looked for teachers along the way, whether it was a Buddhist teacher in a weekend retreat or, it wasn't necessarily correlated to exactly what I was doing, but just anything that helped me heal. So I was a clearer channel, I pursued. So I've
Mm.
studied with teachers about flower essences, homeopathy, acupressure, different things to just understand energy and anything that affects me. So that is how I would say, I would approach the learning as be attracted to all the things that call out to you because it's not a straight line. as you know, David, it's a wandering path that takes you along your destiny and to help you tap into all your abilities.
That's right. And I remember we spoke once before, and you brought up this analogy of not everyone being Michael Jordan necessarily. So, like in anything in life, you can take it all the way and put in your 10,000 hours and be a pro and be the best, but you don't have to be. We can all learn how to play basketball. We don't all have to be Michael Jordan was the analogy you shared, which is funny because that's the exact analogy and the exact person that I use for that analogy
Oh,
all the
really?
time. When I discuss teaching the intuitive arts and learning the intuitive arts, but you are more niche in the sense that you really focus on the medical part, on the physical ailments, and on the messages that those physical ailments are trying to tell the person, right? So, do you believe, and through your experience, have you seen that every single physical symptom is a message from our spirit. And can everybody really maybe not be Michael Jordan, but learn to listen to those messages?
Okay, let me unpack that. So, yes, I think that there are messages that everyone can learn to get, but is every single symptom a message from your spirit? Probably not, right? If I'm not paying attention and I trip as I'm walking on the sidewalk and I fall off the curb and I twist my ankle, I mean, maybe the message there from my spirit is pay attention to where you're walking. But I think there are some things where it is just physiology. There are times where somebody reaches out to me for a session and I will say, I think this is going to be really simple. I'm hearing already your spirit say you're taking two different meds and there's a conflict between them, and that's why you're having that symptom. Right. And so it isn't a message. And I'll be very upfront about that because, hey, it's nice sometimes when it's just physiology and it's something that's an easy fix. To change one med or to add in a supplement, those in some ways, those are the easiest. But I would say probably 75% of the time there's a message and 95% of the time with chronic symptoms, right? Mild but chronic persistent symptoms, whether it's migraines or back pain or digestive issues or achy joints, frozen shoulder, those sorts of things that I really have yet to see one that doesn't have a big message behind it, just from understanding that how we create weak spots in the body is because we each store negative energy in our body, and where we store it has to do with how we integrate messages and negative energy into ourselves. So a boss could walk into an office and scream and yell at the employees, and one person gets a headache, and one person gets a stomach ache, and another person gets, back pain. And that's because of how they internalize that stressor. One person makes it, it triggers them about their father and how he used to be a bully and yell at the kids. And somebody else, gets a headache because she feels like nobody ever listens to her. And how we internalize our stressors creates these pathways and these weak areas in the body. And understanding that is a big part of how we heal ourselves and make ourselves more resistant to illness and injury going forward.
Mhm. And for those who are listening who are like, this sounds amazing, but could we just unpack the mystery of being an intuitive or a medical intuitive? So when you are working with somebody, oh, maybe we'll do working with somebody else and then ourselves, and you can
Okay.
walk us through how we could do it ourselves. But when you're working with somebody, so for example, your eyes are closed and they tell you their name, are they giving you symptoms, or are you just looking at them with your eyes closed and sensing, hearing, seeing, knowing? What is the process like?
Okay. And as you mentioned in the beginning, each medical intuitive, the process is probably a little different. My job, as I understand it, is to one, be the translator between you, if you're the client, you and your spirit, and to take whatever awareness you bring into the session and expand it out tenfold, right? And so I don't just kind of scan the body like I'm a giant MRI machine. I start with what's the symptom that's aggravating you the most? And then I'll say, what do you know about it? When did it start? What's going on? Are there any stressors that make it worse? And then I connect to your spirit and say, well, here's what your spirit says about it. It actually started 9 months ago. Here's what it relates to, blah, blah, blah. And then we unpack that, and your spirit will give you guidance on here's how to interact with those stressors going forward so you can set up better boundaries so you don't get triggered, so you can have this release of the stuck energy in the body. And then at the end of the session, I do energy work to release whatever we've just opened up to promote healing. And so can people do it themselves? Absolutely. And I'm happy to walk at the end of this. I can walk people through a guided meditation to just get a taste of it. And back to your, our Michael Jordan analogy that we both use, you might not be able to hear in paragraph form, like I can hear when I'm talking to your spirit, but you can get a word or a phrase or a visual that makes you go, oh, that's what that back pain is about. It is related to the argument I had with my brother last week. That is when my back started hurting. And it gives you a way to start processing it. And then maybe you meditate some more, or you journal and you do things to help release and flush that out. So it might not be as quick and easy as me just going, whoop, handing you, a couple paragraphs of information. But absolutely, everyone's spirit wants to communicate with them every day.
Can you give us a few examples of what a visual for you, from your perspective, might look like? Are you seeing colors, shapes, forms, images?
Yes, all of the above. So for instance, when I ask someone a question, and here's an example from yesterday. I was talking to a client in session, and I asked her a question and said, well, do you feel like you get along with your sister now? She was explaining how they had a, horrible relationship as kids. And she said, oh yeah, I get along with her now. And the whole core of her energy just went whoop, and stepped outside of her body, which is something that I see when people tell a lie to themselves, right? It's something that they want to be true, or they're withholding from me. And they're like, yeah, it's all good. I feel fine now. I feel fine. Beep, their energy goes off to the side. So that's just a quick way for me to know, wait. And so I don't then say, you're lying. I say something like, that seems interesting. Your body seems to have conflict about that. Let's investigate some more. And then I got her spirit to ask a really specific question. She burst into tears. She's like, oh my God, we're not okay. And here's, and then she got to come forward, own her truth, acknowledge where there was still wounding for her. And we were really able to do some healing. And her shoulder pain was almost gone by the time the session was done. And so she could feel that release and know, okay, that's what that was about.
And so just to back up for a little bit more with the visual for some folks who are like, but wait, what does it look like when somebody's spirit jumps out of their body, Christine? And, I teach the intuitive arts as well, not the medical side of it. And so this part maybe gets a little tricky because we all see differently. So I want to start by acknowledging that you see the way you see, and you probably almost have if I had to guess, you could tell us, but a system of like this color or this energy.
Yes.
When I look at it, usually means this. So you have your own language.
Absolutely. And when people say, well, I want to see what you see, I'm really clear. It's not that when I see red on your base of your neck right now, I see a little bit of red right around it, right? So there's a little bit of compaction there. There's a little bit of tension. So when I see that, that's your spirit or my spirit showing me that. How they might show that to another intuitive sitting next to me might look different, because we all, if we start doing this work, we develop a shorthand with our spirit. And in my training classes where I'm working with teaching people the intuitive arts, I'm helping them develop that shorthand. So they'll say to me, well, I'm getting this sensation. And I'll say, oh yeah, your spirit's saying whenever she gives you that visual or that sensation in your hand, this is what she wants you to do. But that might not apply to everybody else in the class. So for me, when I see energy step off to the side, it looks like a grayish beam in the center of the person that just exits the body, like a cartoon character, like whoop, stage right, just exits out. And it's a real quick jump. And that's what my spirit shows me to say, notice that, notice how that felt different. And the more you start paying attention to what you hear and the visuals you see, you also start feeling the difference in your body. And so that's why I say it's so important for people to feel for resonance. Whenever you're double checking what another intuitive says to you, what you get through journaling or meditation, feel for that resonance, because this is such a great barometer and you want to develop this instrument.
I was just going to say, maybe we could break it down even further, because it sounds like there are two abilities going on here. So one is seeing, and then you're seeing red, like you said, you saw red around the throat, right? But then there's also a sense of knowing of what that red means. So you're seeing and you're knowing. When I teach, I kind of consider that two abilities. Would you look at it that way?
Yes, I would say three abilities. The first is seeing, the second is hearing, and the third is feeling in your body. So if somebody's saying to me when I'm teaching, like you do, I'm teaching, somebody to tap in to hear their spirit or to do healing work, and they say, well, when I was in meditation, I heard my spirit say X, Y, and Z. And I'll say, X and Y were right. I think Z was your ego mind. I think you kind of trailed off and jumped in. Go back and feel. And they're like, oh yeah, you're right. It sounded this way when I was hearing my spirit. The voice shifted and I felt, so I'm feeling the resonance from that. And again, that's my spirit messaging me with that resonance, but everybody's spirit develops that shorthand, right? And so for some people, they could study with you and me and every teacher they can find, and they never learn to hear their spirit because their spirit really wants them to develop visuals and to develop feeling in their body, that clairsentience.
Yeah. So you're feeling, you're hearing, and you're seeing kind of all simultaneously as you're giving a reading to the person. And let's just go further down this rabbit hole. I think that's why we're here. So, for example, somebody books a session with Christine Lang. They wait the 6 months it takes to get in because she's so popular. They've got this ailment that's gotten worse because they've been waiting. Just kidding, hopefully. And let's say, for example, something around the chest. They come see you. They either on Zoom or in person. They sit down. So is it 60 minutes on average?
Yes.
And so you sit down and can you give us a little synopsis of how a session like that might go? And if you were to see something, for example, around the chest, or if you want to give us another recent example, and what that energy turned out to be, just if we could just see the world through Christine's eyes in a reading, I would love to have that experience.
So I'll walk you through a session I had a couple of weeks ago with a woman who contacted me because she had persistent bladder infections. And she said, I can't live my life on antibiotics, but I get rid of one and within a month, it's back. And so when I looked at her bladder, I saw that there was a lot of red. And red really, for me, means intensity. It doesn't have to be bad, right? Because red, Valentine's Day, we just have that association. It means passion and intensity, but it can mean fear or a history of fear. And in this case, it did. And I said, I feel like this bladder infection represents you being pissed, not at any one person, right? But that feeling of being pissed and having it not be allowed. And she smiled and said, absolutely. I was raised in a really strict religious household. You weren't allowed to be angry, especially if you were a girl. You were not allowed to be angry. And her spirit gave her some brilliant insights on how to process that. So within 10 minutes into the session, she's crying. I'm tearing up. We're pulling through all this powerful information and loving guidance that her spirit is bringing her. And that was our second session that we had last week, and the symptoms are virtually gone. I don't expect them to come back. And if they do, she now has tools to look at, okay, here's how I'm going to journal. Here's what I'm going to do in meditation. I know how to work with this as a signaling system of how I'm holding anger in and not allowing myself or giving myself permission to be angry. And so, I don't want to waste a lot of time because we do only have an hour in a session on the person's history and background. So I tend to say, what are the symptoms you most want to get resolved? And give me 3 or 4 sentences about your childhood so I know who the key players are in your life now and growing up. And then I close my eyes and connect to their spirit, and we're off to the races. So then most of the 45 minutes we have left is having conversation where I'm just giving her spirit's message. She's asking questions. The guidance flows forth. And then the last 10 minutes or so, I do the energy work, as I said. And it really is making that connection of what message is there for me in that persistent symptom, and then how do I work with it? It's one thing to know what that message is, and then people always go, well, what do I do with that, right? And then it's getting that guidance on how to work through it so you have true healing, not just palliative care.
So you're almost giving them like an energetic prescription of sorts.
Nice, David.
And it sounds like you're pulling the wisdom out of the wounds, right? You're looking at that pain and helping them see what the bigger picture is, and that helps their body heal. And you said in 2 sessions, this one went away. How often does that happen, where in 1 or 2 sessions something goes away? And is there an average amount of time it tends to take? Now, obviously, if someone comes to you and says, Christina, I've got cancer,
Right.
that's maybe we could talk about that next. But on average, in your 30 years of experience, what are we talking here? How much work do I need to do? How many hours?
I would say, as you can imagine, every case is different. I would say within 1 or 2 sessions, you have the tools and you have the understanding of why the symptom is there. And then the symptom becomes, in some cases, it goes away completely. In other cases, it becomes this barometer or teaching tool. And so my allergies are the perfect example. They were the thing that got me on my spiritual path. So many of us get on our path because of physical symptoms. And and what I learned once I could really hear my spirit and get the understanding is that allergies were my inner critic. It was how I beat myself up and policed myself to try harder, try harder. And so that inner critic, we tend to take our most critical parent's voice and stick it in our head as our way of policing ourselves. And when I was in my second year of law school, it got really activated. I was used to school coming pretty easily to me, getting straight A's without a lot of work. So I landed in law school all cocky, and then all of a sudden I got B's and C's, and I was like, "What?" Right? And so I started working really hard and sort of beating myself up, like whipping the racehorse that's already running. And that's when my allergies started. And once I made that connection with my spirit's help, that my allergies were a sign from my body, hey, you're whipping the racehorse that's already running, and it's not helping, and it's making things worse. I literally was allergic to my own thinking, is what I was allergic to. And so my allergy symptoms reduced significantly, but I would still have a tiny bit of them. And it got to the point where it was the inside corner of my right eye would itch. And when it would itch, I would stop and go, what was I just thinking? Oh yeah, I was just beating myself up. And I would stop. So it took probably a year and a half to fully get rid of my allergies, but it was such a gift because at the end of that journey, I had no more allergies and I completely transformed the way I talked to myself. And so my internal motivator shifted. And that's why so many of these chronic symptoms are a gift. Like the client I mentioned before, she now has a really healthy expression of anger. And she can say to somebody, hey, that really didn't feel good, whether it's to her husband or family members, and her life feels freer. So it took a couple of sessions, but now she has this teaching tool. And that's how your symptoms frequently are a gift to you if we can approach it that way.
Mm. I would love to go even a bit deeper down this rabbit hole. So I think everybody watching, listening has had or has some physical symptom that they're like, I just wish it would go away, right? Just go away. I've tried whatever I've tried and it's not working. Maybe it starts to take a toll on our body image, our self-image when we don't feel well. Maybe we get depressed and sad, we slow down. Almost every human being has or has had this experience of getting sick. So when we go, okay, I've got a physical ailment, it's my skin, it's an organ, it's my lungs, my head keeps hurting, it's just not going away. If you were to give us some really great advice or tools on how to approach it, what would that be? And I'm not that smart, so maybe you can simplify it for David's brain, and just kind of walk us through. All right, you've got this symptom. Let's sit down. Let's look at it together. What would that look like?
So I think there's two approaches that I can think of, and I'm going to give them to you in reverse order of how I'd recommend you do them. The first, because it's simpler, is prayer. And I think we tend to be raised in a culture where prayer is sort of like treating God like an ATM machine. We just kind of like, please may I have some, please may I have some. And I think that really effective prayer is better viewed as a conversation. I want to have this conversation with the divine where this symptom is really troubling. And it feels like if it is a teaching tool, it's now such a hard class. I can't even get, the first lesson down. So if the universe could shift how that teaching comes to me, I would really appreciate it. And sometimes that will occur and sometimes it doesn't. And then faith and grace for me is trusting when it doesn't shift that your spirit or God is saying, actually, that is the best teacher. I know this seems awful, but trust me, it's the best teacher, right? And then that brings us to that second option, which is doing a guided meditation of sorts where we go into the body, guide our awareness into that symptom area and ask, what are you trying to tell me? What is it time for me to know? And sometimes asking, what is it time for me to know, is really powerful because it's acknowledging that our learning and our healing happens like layers on an onion. And
Mm.
people come to me in a session and say, I want all the answers and I want all of the. I just had a session with somebody this morning who said, I want to get rid of all the karma I have with my ex-husband. So let's just clear all that up now. Like, how many days do you have? Like, I don't, I'm not going to do this in an hour. And so our human, temptation is to say, I want it all now. But when we ask, what is it time for me to know now and work with, it's an acknowledgement of that process.
And wow, can I get rid of all my karma with my ex-husband right now? Wow. And also, God is not an ATM machine.
And that I'm borrowing that Tasha Silver. I love her stuff. And she talked about that in one of her podcasts. She was like, I really think that most of us treat God like an ATM machine. And I'm like, I think we do.
That's really wonderful insight. So, would you be willing for 5 or so minutes to walk us through a short meditation?
Okay. So if you will close your eyes and just focus on your breathing. I always say observe your breathing. As you inhale, picture the air coming in down the back of your lungs. As you exhale, picture the air coming up the front of your lungs and out. Just observe the breathing for a moment. Picture your energy like snow in a snow globe that's just been shaken. And now, each breath, you're allowing it to all come back into the center of your body and settle down. And then we start with gathering all of our energy, almost like you're making a snowball. Gather your energy that's within your body. Imagine it packing together like a snowball in the center of your chest. This is just you coalescing your awareness. Other thoughts pop into your head, let them drop away. Just exhale them out. Good. Just keep focusing on that rotating ball of energy. And now picture this ball of energy in the center of your chest that holds a lot of your awareness. It's taking your heart energy with it and move it to the area where you have symptoms in your body. Just choose one area, move that ball of energy there, and allow it to just be present. Just sit and pulsate in that area. Good. And then, when you're ready, ask that area of your body, what is it time for me to know about this area? You can also ask, how is love being kept out of this area of my body? Good. And in your mind's eye, you bow to that area of your body, recognizing there's wisdom there. And move that ball of energy back to the center of your chest. And when you feel centered again, you can open your eyes.
Wow, that was really wonderful. Thank you.
You're
That,
welcome.
what a great tool of moving the awareness to that place and then just asking it those two questions. Specifically, how are you keeping love out of this area? And it brought up something for me that I think a lot of people go through, which is body image. So if we have a body ailment, then there's something wrong with us, and then we feel like people see us through that lack in some way. So I'm too tall, I'm too short, I'm too heavy, I'm too thin, I'm too old. Whatever. We all have something with these imperfect human forms, right? How does uh, I think the question I want to ask is, so when somebody hits on the emotional side of the pain, of the physical pain, the spiritual emotional side of the physical pain, whether it's body image or fear of death, whatever happens to be, what's that next step like past the meditation, our long-term homework from Christine Lang on how to heal something big, or that at least feels big to us. Somebody else might go, that's no big deal. But for us, it feels big. What would be that homework?
Okay, so I love visuals because they're a way for us to really focus our intent and steer the energy around us in a way that can serve us. So I would offer this visual that my spirit just gave to me as you asked that question, which is see a path out in front of you. And that path is the healing of whatever that emotional issue is that corresponds to that physical symptom. And then see it like a river with all these little tributaries of creeks flowing into it. And those are all the things that are going to show up to assist you. You don't have to go out and find every single teacher, every single book. Allow the universe to start bringing you things. And I always say, invite the universe to wow you, right? Invite the universe to exceed the expectations and the wildest dreams you have for it. And so when we use a visual like that, we're like, okay, universe, bring it. I'm ready to take this on, and I'll do my homework. I'll meditate. I'll journal. I'll contact these healers. I'll, take classes. But I really want to be in this project because it feels self-honoring as well as self-healing. And then we visualize this path where the universe starts sending all these different forms of assistance to aid us, and it becomes joyful. And then you see the miracle that can be there with that symptom as it heals and heals all these other things along the way and lets you meet these great teachers and have all these amazing experiences. And we can see the gift within that symptom.
So the symptom becomes the healing and the miracle. It's the path to our
Yeah.
healing, probably something deeper and a miracle unfolding from that. That's a
Well,
beautiful way to look at it.
as much as we might not like to admit it as humans, we tend to shift when it's uncomfortable. Nobody gets out of bed in the morning and says, everything in my life feels great. I think I'll do something radically different, right? He's like, everything feels great. I'm doing everything the same. It's when we hit these pain points that we go, okay, something's got to give, right? I'm going to do this differently. I'm tired of this creaky knee. I'm tired of this sore hip. I'm tired of these digestive issues. Now I'm going to do something different. And then the universe is waiting to hear that, like, okay, I'm open to change, right? As humans, we kind of fear change if everything's going well. So it's a motivator for us to take our next steps on our path, whatever those are.
Mm. So I have just a really small question for you. uh, why do we as human beings experience all of this pain? What is like the bigger spiritual purpose? And in particular, maybe experiencing all of this physical pain. Uh, I'm assuming you've done thousands of readings over the years, and so you've probably seen patterns and found some deeper answers for yourself. What is it that wisdom have you come to around why, as humans, do we come down to this planet, maybe as spirit, as souls, and experience pain?
A little question.
Tiny, tiny question.
Tell me the meaning of the universe. I would say that in spirit world, my understanding is it's more absolute, right? It's love-based. There isn't fear and pain present. And it is a type of classroom. And I think we do a lot of learning in spirit form and a lot of soul evolution. This is another type of classroom. This is more the hands-on type of classroom. It's experiential learning. And I think we value both. And so if you learn a lot in this absolute form where it's only love and it feels super safe, I think we learn a whole lot of things. But if you learn about forgiveness and compassion, you're only learning them there in theory because there's nothing to forgive and there's no one to extend compassion towards. So you come down here where we have duality and somebody is short because somebody is taller and somebody is not that smart because somebody's brilliant, and everything is in contrast. And there's love and there's fear or lack of love. And so now with the contrast, we have this setup to practice all of these things that we learned in spirit form, right? So I love, there was an analogy I read years ago of somebody saying, well, this is learning in spirit form is like building a Ferrari in your garage. You know, in theory, it drives fast. But at a certain point, you're like, okay, enough with the tinkering. I want to actually go drive it and feel the speed and feel the acceleration. And so coming down here is feeling our way through the experience of forgiving people, of loving people, of having compassion, of working through fear. And nothing gives us fear like fear in the physical body and symptoms and pain. Like that'll get your attention quick, right? So when we get complacent with things or we're not progressing like our soul thinks we can in some of these other topics, like love and compassion and forgiveness and self-love, we might have symptoms to alert us to these blocked areas in our thinking and in our belief systems.
Mm, it's beautiful. Thank you for answering one of the deepest questions we could have.
Justice.
I would say that you did. Thank you. And in speaking of classrooms, where can people find your classroom? Are you teaching how to develop these abilities? And if you are, where can people find you?
So my website is christinelang.org, O-R-G, and I do a lot of classes throughout the year. So it can be a little tricky to book with me. And so it hopefully doesn't take you 6 months, but it can take some time. And so I offer group sessions, and I also do teach intuitive energy healing, which is my style of healing, which is sort of a combination of being able to channel and do something similar to Reiki. And I teach those classes several times a year, a level 1, level 2, and a level 3. And in addition, I have an intensive that's about how to hear your spirit. And it's 6 classes where you can work on that really direct communication with your spirit and having those conversations.
I love that. So christinelang.org.
Yes.
And the book is The Body Whisperer, Your Symptoms Tell Me Your Truth.
Yes.
Wonderful. And I just want to say that I've been teaching intuitive training and this kind of work for years, and I rarely come across somebody who's so well developed and sincere and grounded in their own style and way of doing things. And I've been sending you people for years for sessions. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here and sharing all your light and your wisdom. I would love to go for another 2 to 3 hours, uh, but I'm going to be mindful of your time and energy. And thank you so much for being here with us. Really appreciate it,
Oh,
Christine.
thank you. Thank you for having me. And I thank you for your kind words. I always say, it can be spiritual and sound wonderful, but at the end of the day, it's got to be practical. And I think that's why I end up working with a lot of corporate people. It's just like, let's make it work and get you back to work and have quick healings. So I tend to, somebody called me the anti-airy fairy healer once. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll take that. But I do think things should have a practical application in our lives, as well as that spiritual and emotional resonance. So thank you. Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Thanks, Christine. Take care.